Hello, welcome. My name is Ryan McGibney. I am from the partnerships team at DBT Labs, and it is my pleasure to be introducing the speakers for this session who are from DBT Labs. You may recognize them from some of the other sessions earlier this week. We've got Wasila Kader, who's an analytics engineer at DBT Labs, and we've got Jeremy Cohen and Cody Peterson, who are product managers. They will be presenting this workshop called Build Your First DBT Python Model. All the chat, conversations, and Q&A will be taking place in the DBT Slack channel Coalesce Python Workshop DBX. So get in there, get the link to the guide for this session, which will be important for getting hands-on. If you're not part of the DBT community Slack yet, you still have time to join at community.getdbt.com. After the session, we will have folks popping in to answer questions. We'll also have people, for those of you in the room here today, we'll have people walking around to assist you as we get going here. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Jericho.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Welcome. So good to have you all. This is the concluding session in a series. Maybe some of you were at the keynote on Tuesday, the initial announcement of Python and DBT. We went into a little more detail yesterday. Cody, Lee, and I talked about when you would think about the advantages of SQL, the advantages of Python, why you should want to have both in your toolkit. And now today, we're really getting our hands on actually building a Python model using DBT. Can you raise your hand? Could I ask for a show of hands? Who has already built a Python model in DBT? All right, you can leave. We've got nothing for you here. No, I'm just kidding. No, very, very happy to have you. Actually really happy to hear, or to see, that so many of you have not yet had that experience. By the end of this session, every single person here will be able to raise your hand, right? We are going to be locking the doors and not letting anybody out until that DBT run succeeds, all right? Now, we got ourselves an hour. We've got some exercises to walk through together. So maybe if we go to the next slide, I think that's, oh, this is us. These are the three of us. There's going to be like goals of the session, but just some quick setup. So we're going to be using DBT Cloud. You're able to use the IDE, make it really easy. We don't need to install DBT Core locally on your CLI. If you do want to do that, okay, that's fine. Totally your prerogative. But just in terms of minimum viable, get set and go. Same deal for, we have invited everyone to a Databricks account, specifically for the purpose of getting access to those in-browser notebooks, which again make it pretty easy to develop Python code in the browser without having to get a local setup client installation. If you want to do this exercise using Snowflake, Snowpark, Python, if you even want to try doing it, feel really motivated, using BigQuery and Dataproc, you totally can, your prerogative. We used Snowpark for our demos, our live code golf yesterday. It's awesome. Python and Databricks, PySpark, also awesome. DBT supports all three. So again, these are kind of like the ways that we want you to get started and get going if you don't have any prior experience, any prior setup doing this stuff, because the goal of the session is you're going to leave having built yourself a very nice, very fine DBT Python model. Yeah, so maybe show of hands if you do have access to both of these things. Okay, very scientific measurement, 30%. Let's get the rest of you access. Oh, okay. Okay, so we think everyone here should have received emails with access to both DBT Cloud and to Databricks. maybe check your email, check your personal email, check that spam folder. No, I'm just kidding. And if you have not received those emails and need us to just like send those invitations, can you raise your hand and we'll have someone walk around and grab you. Thanks, Colin. Thank you. Actually, Jess, that's a much better system. Thank you. So in the Slack channel, there's a thread. Put your name, your email address too, Jess. Yep, just throw them in there. And then at the speed of mail client, you'll be receiving access to both of these platforms.
All right, we'll just give folks a couple of minutes for setup, and then we're gonna move through. And y'all, for the convenience of our TAs, please add your email to the thread in Slack, and we can consolidate that way.
Oh, okay. If you still need help getting access, can you raise your hands? We can get a TA over to you, hopefully. We are going to keep on moving.
All right, so we're gonna keep on moving. If you have any issues, throw it in the Slack thread. Someone will help you. The session will be recorded, and we're gonna have a lot of time for y'all to code individually. So we'll get you in there. Don't worry. But we're gonna move on for now.
Cool. Okay, let's get ourselves started. We're going to be doing an exercise that should feel pretty familiar if you've seen some of the presentations over the last few days. It's going to be some basic Python data modeling on top of our demo data set, which is a coffee shop data set. So it is going to be in this repository, Colas 2022 Python workshop, that will have access to all of the code at the end of the session, as well as some worked solutions. Again, something to reference at the end of the session. But for now, let's get ourselves started. The starting point branch is going to be the main branch.
And then for those of you in the IDE or in local as well, if any of y'all are doing that, should have created a separate branch for yourselves as well to code in.
So main is your starting point. Go ahead and check yourself out a new branch that you can be developing on.
All right, so let's get into it. Let's talk about how Python models work in DBT. So typically for SQL models, you're doing everything within the IDE. So you are developing your code, you're running your model, debugging any potential errors, maybe want to display what the data looks like, generate and run tests, and if the model needs some tweaks, you go back, you tweak your SQL, and everything is happening in a single place. And the flow for Python models typically is going to look a bit different than this. So the way that we imagine Python models being developed in a typical flow is that you are going to do your Python transformation outside of DBT, most likely in a notebook, like a Databricks notebook, which we're going to be using today. Once the transformations are working outside of DBT, at that point, we will move the code into DBT, create a model that returns a data frame, run our model. So we're switching up the flow a little bit. All right, so if you are in Databricks in our account, what we're going to ask you to do is there is a workshop notebook in the shared workspace. Please clone it, and then you can work in there. Just highly ask that y'all don't make any edits within the actual workshop notebook in the shared workspace. Make a clone, and you can add your own code in there. So let's go through a basic Python model, the most basic that we can do. And we're just going to use this to see what the flow looks like. All right. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go into Databricks. For those of you who might not be super familiar with Databricks, I'm going to go over to this bar on the left-hand side. Click on Workspace, and that's, if I click on Shared, that's where the workshop notebook is going to be. I'm going to clone this just for myself. Then add it. So ideally you want to add this to your own, you'll see your own email address up top. I'm just going to add it to Cody's for now. All right. Now I'm going to go into the notebook I just cloned. Beautiful. All right. So when you come into the notebook, first thing you want to do, make sure that your schema matches the schema you put in your development credentials. Yeah. So I'm going to run that cell, run the next cell as well. We're just making it easier to refer to the Spark variable, or we're making it easier to refer to Spark here, cell 2. And then I'm going to go down to the orders table. So in order for this to work, you want to make sure that you've done a DBT build in Cloud so that you have your orders model built out in Databricks. And then once that exists as a table in Databricks, I can run this. And we can take a look at the results. This is not defined. Yeah. One-handed. All right, there we go. So we see that we're getting back a data frame. If I look at the type of orders here, go in one-handed. All right, and we get back a PySpark data frame. So all I'm going to do now is just a very simple describe. Bear with me while I do some one-handed typing here. All right. And then if you want to see what the results look like, I'm just going to do display. I'll just give that a second to run. Yes. Thank you for calling that out. Better? All right. We're going to let this keep running. What I'm going to do, we'll come back to and look at this in just a second, is I'm going to now copy this code over to cloud. So what I'm going to do to create a new, I'm going to create a new model after this refreshes. I just refreshed it a second ago. Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna go into the models folder, or let's create a branch first to make sure I'm not in main. So coalesce first name, last name. All right. All right. You have to build out your schema, right? Yeah, it might take some time, I think, to do that. Okay. All right. So we're going to start by running a dbt build. Again, we want to make sure that the orders model is built out in the data warehouse. We're going to let that run.
So once you run dbt build, you should see a bunch of the models passing, and then a few should error out if I'm in the correct place. And the idea is for you to go in and then fix those models that have errors and write the Python code. Has everyone gotten to this stage of getting in dbt and running a build, running Databricks? Raise of hands. Who has? Okay. Walk around. All right.
Do y'all want to walk around and then I'll keep going? All right, folks, if I can direct your attention back to the screen, Cody and Jeremy will continue walking around helping folks, but we're gonna continue building our first Python model. So if I go into the models folder, I'm gonna go into challenges and just, let's initialize first and then I'll create a new model in there. All right, there we go. So I'm going to go into the challenges folder, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually, Cody, once you're done over there, help request it on stage. All right, there it is. All right, so I'm going to create a new file, and we're going to call it describe.py. So this is going to be a Python model, so we have the .py extension. I'm going to hit create. Open that up. It's working now. All right. And then what I'm going to do is we are going to start our Python model with a define. So we have dbt define model, or define. Why?
So one of the common errors that we're seeing here is when you are creating your own branch, it is showing up here as initialize dbt project. Make sure that you don't click that. What's happening is it is overwriting all of your files here and creating the default starter project instead of the models that we have here. If you do get to that place, just revert the changes that you have and make sure that you don't click that button. What you should see when you dbt build is basically the models in the challenges folder. For instance, this pivot one does not actually have Python code here, so it should fail. But yeah, let us know if you're running into issues. We'll keep circling around.
Okay, I took a look at some screens, seeing some good progress. We're making it, we're getting there together. If you haven't been able to successfully run DBT, but you have been able to get access to Databricks, right? You can stand on the shoulders of giants here and just use Cody's schema just to get some PySpark code running, some Python running inside Databricks, and then we can move back into DBT after. So ideally, you've set this to your schema, you've been able to successfully build your project, all's well and good. But if you just need to, these models are already built. Again, doing some really simple setups so that we can use the Spark session, that we can read that model, and then .describe, display described. So this is one thing that you can work on if you're running into issues with DBT. The big idea here is that we are going to be taking, oh yeah, I see what you mean about typing one-handed, Wasila. We are going to be taking the pretty much exact code that we got running and working over inside our Databricks notebook here. So I'm actually going to delete this to start. And borrow this. All right, and so instead of having to do like a session.table read and having to interpolate a schema variable, right? The whole idea is DBT gets to take care of all of this for us. I just type dbt.ref orders, no f string, and then because yeah, thank you, Cody. Because a DBT Python model is a function named model, it reads some data in, and then it returns a transformed data set. In this case, our transformed data set is really very simple. It's just the described summary statistics of the orders model. But we have refed the orders model. It's inside this def model function, and we return described, right? Where described is, as we saw in the notebook, a PySpark data frame. Okay, so this is how we took the code that we got running inside Databricks, inside the notebook, and we are able to move it into the DBT framework and get it running within DBT in a second.
IDE restart, good measure.
Happens. I'm not totally sure.
Once you get it.
Yes, so what Cody's doing now is just dbt build, selecting the describe model. Describe is the name of the model. Describe.py is the name of the model file. And dbt is going to work through the project, find that model, run some queries, and we'll be able to see the actual Python that gets submitted to run against Databricks. It's going to look a lot like the Python that we submitted to run inside Databricks, but now, inside the context of the IDE. Give me just 1 second here.
All right, folks. A couple of folks have been asking if we have solutions anywhere. So if you go into the GitHub repository, there is actually a branch titled Solutions. So in the main branch we have, under the models directory, the challenges subfolder, and that contains Python models that have comments where y'all can try to code and do the challenges. And then there's a solutions branch which has the completed code as well. So you can reference that. The repository is going to be public indefinitely, so that's going to be available to y'all.
Yeah, so I know we've got just a couple of minutes left in the allotted time. I was joking earlier, we're obviously not locking the doors until you've had a chance to run your first dbt Python model. I would, if you are still interested in spending time working on it, maybe not in this room, because I think we do have to give up this room at the top of the hour, but as you see us around, as you're interested in continuing to work on this, these solutions are going to be on GitHub for posterity. If you have access to this Databricks account, certainly through the end of the Coalesce, this dbt Cloud account. Again, apologies for some of the wrinkles in having so many folks working simultaneously. Let's maybe just go once more through some of the high-level stuff that we covered. So we were able to write some code, some very simple code, in a notebook inside Databricks, read in a table that existed in the database because it had been written there by DBT, written there as a SQL model. This is traditionally the way that you would access this, right? You would have to hard code schema, interpolate it into a session.table read, right? A way of loading a table from Databricks as a data frame. You can introspect the type of that table. You can perform a transformation on that table. This is a very, very simple transformation, but .describe, this is a transformation after all, and display the transformed, the described table, right? And be able to visualize that in Databricks. The big idea is we took that same code, instead of having to hard code the schema ourselves, hard code the environment, interpolate that with Python F strings, and also to write the kind of boilerplate logic of the session.table. It's different on different data platforms. There's like really minute differences that you just shouldn't need to have to think about. You just get to write dbt.ref. This is going to resolve to the correct pointer for your environment. So if you ran dbt build and you were able to build the upstream SQL models into your schema, that's where they're going to be read from here by dbt.ref. In this case, I'm working in the delightful environment of Cody. So this is going to return Cody's version of the orders model built in development, loaded as a data frame, a PySpark data frame in this case. We're applying the transformation, and then we're returning that described, that transformed data frame. And these are all the bones of our Python model, right? A model function, load some data in, apply the transformation, return it. Conceptually very similar, I hope, to if you've written DBT SQL models, it's the same basic idea. You can't use Jinja, and in a lot of senses, you probably don't need to, because if what you're trying to do is something like a loop or templating out some code dynamically, that's something that Python is much more capable of doing. Even if what you want to do is like introspect the database, say, hey, tell me about all the columns in this model, or all of the models in this given schema. Those are things that you would be used to doing with like dbtutils macros written in Jinja for SQL, because SQL doesn't have those capabilities natively, but Python totally does, right? So it actually feels familiar, but a little bit different. Yeah, it takes a little getting used to. Gotcha. Yeah, okay. Great questions. All right, so we got a very, very fancy model here that Cody put together. In this case, it was some k-means clustering, and one of the necessary inputs is the number of clusters, right, that you suspect exist in the data set, and it's going to cluster it into that many. In order to make this a little more configurable and also kind of like pull those static predicates further out, what Cody did here was actually add a model config, a custom model config in dbtproject.yaml, so that this is going to apply to all of the models in the project, suspected personas, like the number of desired clusters as 5, and then inside the model, using this same kind of dbt object, dbt.config.get, the name of that configuration. So it's set at the start of the project, and then it's actually going to be supplied to the Python code that's generated and then offered up to Databricks. And that's like, hey, 5, that's what you should use for that one. Yep. There isn't direct access today within Python models to variables and environment variables, though there is a feature request for it. Definitely something that could be on the near-term roadmap. If that's what you want, you can, like within a YAML file, I'm so sorry. Do you mind holding this for a second? So it is an extra step here. But this is a place that you have access to variables and environment variables in this kind of like standard YAML configuration for the model, and then you can pull them in within the Python code using that same dbt.config.get. Not to be confused with dbt.config nothing. You could think of this as dbt.config.set. We didn't do that though because a one-letter character transposition, oh boy, to do something very different. But in this case, we're saying, because we didn't want you running this one right from the outset, we're actually disabling this model, enabled false. But you could also materialize table, materialize incremental, and then also pull in that kind of static configuration from elsewhere in the project. Again, I think it's very common to see, this is maybe just my sense, in Python models, things like see this kind of frequently. How many clusters do you want? Where do you want to write the resulting files, et cetera, et cetera. This is fairly standard practice, like in notebooks, when you're just doing kind of Python scripting work. We would, kind of as a best practice, encourage you to actually redefine this as DBT model configuration, right? So that it can be tracked in metadata and diffed a little more easily and actually available in places like manifest.json and in a metadata API in DBT Cloud. And then instead of just thank you, Blue. Instead of just passing it here, you would actually pull it in as configuration available from the project. Yep. And then again, if it's a variable or an environment variable, that gives you access to all the same kind of environment level or CLI flag overrides that you would have elsewhere. Okay, well, we're at time. Is it worth talking about like API or?
No, just say like we'll update it.
Okay. You want to give it a go?
So we will, I think, PR the solutions branch into the main branch and follow up with Slack and or email instructions on how you could run all this yourself, and I think provide a little more explanation of the challenges that we had laid out. Yeah, I think we're about at time. We will definitely be hanging around. Feel free to ask us anything.
Yeah, I will be wearing this pink hat all day long. It's a unique item. There's only 3 of them. So you have a 1 in 3 chance of finding me. Definitely feel free to come up with any more questions. That was a really good one. Thank you. Thanks, folks. Sorry again. No, it's, the joy of live demo where we have 100 people all live demoing at the same time. I hope that at the very least, while you have access to the Databricks account, you can play around with a little bit of Python code, a little bit of PySpark code. Cody did do a great job, I will say, of kind of like sketching out notebook cells in the notebook to proceed down. Even if you don't manage to run every single piece of it or modify it accordingly, there's some nice comments in there. And just to feel out, there was actually a great comment from Natty, one of our solutions architects, in the Slack channel on our presentation yesterday, just how informative he finds the way that Cody writes Python and formats Python. There are so many different ways of doing this. The zen of Python, of course, is that there's one best way, and it takes a lifetime to figure it out because there are so many options along the way. But I learn a lot from reading Cody's code, and I think you all could too. Thanks, everyone.
You can also find us in the community Slack as well, so feel free to reach out, ask questions. All right, thanks everyone.